everybody, welcome to my studio and welcome to your first full introductory watercolor painting with me. This class will be available for everybody, for all subscription levels, the entire time, so you can feel free to go back to check out this video later. If you are subscribed to a PDF tier, you're free to use this video as an inspiration to maybe subscribe to a video tier in the future. And this is meant to be as an introductory video into my workflow, into my work style, so you kind of have an idea of how these classes are going to be. Work at your own speed. This is the beauty of a video recording. You can stop it, you can ask me some questions, I will answer them as soon as I can, then you can go back to painting this. But I encourage you to try to work with me, try to experience the speed of the watercolor. And this will improve over time, of course. This will get better with practice. And even if you think, oh, I can't do this, this looks like a little too hard, this is a full painting, I've never painted before, if you're a beginner, I can tell you that you can do it, but you have to do it. You have to try. You really have to just jump into it and do your best. Don't worry about the end result. Don't worry what your end painting is going to look like. You have to start picking up your brushes and just trying all of this, trying along with me, trying when you stop the video and kind of working a little bit on your own. Or you can pick up the areas of the painting that you want to practice. You don't have to do the entire thing. Just practice small little areas and maybe later doing the whole painting together. But you will notice over time of how easier it becomes, how more intuitive it becomes, how easier it is for you to work wet into wet, mix the colors, work fast, and not think as much about all the little details and kind of letting the watercolor do its job and watching how it flows, how it blends, how it mixes. It's a beautiful media. It can be a little bit intimidating at first, but there are a lot of ways that we're going to be painting together. We're going to be exploring more detailed style, we're going to be exploring more looser style, something in the middle, so you can find the style that fits you best. And this will help you to just get started and get moving. So let's just jump into it and enjoy some painting together. Okay, so let's take a minute to talk quickly about our supplies we're going to need for today. And all of this is covered in my intro video about the supplies. All of my colors are here, the same ones I'm going to be using today. I'm not going to use all of these. The main colors I'm going to use are Sennelier Yellow, Rose Sienna, Gamboge, Light Red, Alizarin Crimson, Burnt Umber, Prussian Green, Cerulean, a little bit of ultramarine blue, a little bit of phthalo blue, and Payne's Gray. The paper I'm using today is by Arch. This is cold press paper. Of course, I have my water here, so I have one jar for basic quick washing of my brush, and then I have one jar with clean water where I'm going to be picking up that water when I need to mix it on the palette. Also, don't mind the mess on my palette. This is how I usually work. I keep my bright colors, my warm colors on one side, and my cooler and darker colors on the other one, just to prevent too much of mixing between them and to keep the reds and the greens and the oranges and the blues away from each other, since those are the complementary colors, so they can easily give you a lot of the muddy colors. And I just like kind of have separate sections. You have some green, some cooler green, some blues, browns, and darker colors in there. So that's how I usually just gonna go back into those wells. Occasionally, when this gets too much, I do clean it out, but I don't really worry about it that much. The brushes I'm going to be using today are just 3 basic brushes. I like round ones. I do use the flat ones for washes sometimes if I need to pre-wet my paper before applying color. I'm not going to do that today. So I'm just going to grab my number 22 brush for the large wash on the sky and on the hill. I'm going to use my size 10 brush for most of the painting today. And I'm just gonna keep my number 6 brush. I don't know if I'm gonna use this or not. We don't really have that many tiny details today. Paper towels. So I do like to keep these right under my water, just to quickly dry my brush if I have too much water on it. But I also do keep a little sheet of paper towel whenever I need to pick up some extra paint from the paper. If it's going somewhere it's not supposed to go, it's a little too wet, then I do keep just a little bit of the clean paper. I don't use it that much. If you have your tea with you, make sure you keep it on the opposite side from your water. Way too many times it was used to clean my brush. But here is the picture that we are going to be painting today. Feel free to take a screenshot. I'm also going to provide the link to this photograph. This one is from the Unsplash, which is a great resource for royalty-free reference for your works. You can paint from it, you can sell your paintings painted from these photographs. The only thing you're not allowed to do is to resell the actual photograph without modifying it in any way. So we're going to be using pictures from there quite a lot. I recommend in your free time, go in there and just search up whatever you like and kind of have like an inspiration board, so whenever you have time to paint, you will have something in there ready to go. Okay, let's get our paper ready. I am painting on the size 9x12. Feel free to go a little smaller if it seems like a lot. And I'm gonna get my artist tape to secure my paper. To make it easier for everybody, I am not stretching my paper today, just because this is an introductory video and we all kind of on the same page in the beginning of our process. But with doing large paintings like today, where you cover the entire sheet with watercolor, I do recommend that you stretch your paper first. But we're gonna do a video about that. First, we're gonna learn how to stretch paper so that we can use it in our painting. And the tape I use today is an artist tape, artist masking tape. Make sure that you test this tape or any kind of tape you use to secure your paper somewhere on the paper, just to see if it really rips the paper too much. If it does, the way around it is to just take X-Acto knife and just cut out your paper. I don't like to do that, so if I have a paper that's just way too sticky, when I peel it out, I would just stick it on the table a couple of times just to get a little bit of the stickiness off, and then I put it on the paper. So I'm going to sketch the main outlines of the shapes first. I'm using a 2B pencil. I'm gonna press a little higher just so you can, a little harder on the pencil, just to make sure you can see my sketch on the paper. Usually I make a very light sketch, either was using the Prismacolor Color Erase pencils that can be easily erased and they're also quite light on their own, or by using HB or H type of pencils that are also lighter. But anyway, I don't really mind seeing the pencil work showing through the watercolors. It's part of the process. So, but I would recommend that when you copy the lines, if you're copying from the video or if you're copying from a photograph, press rather lighter. I'm going to do it harder just so you can see it better, but kind of do as I say, not as I do for this one. Alright, so what I like to do is just find the main lines that kind of separate different elements. So we have a large slope on the right. We have a lot of mountains sort of in the center in the back, but they are grouped together and they also all just far away in the background. We're gonna paint them all together. So I'm just gonna outline the top shape of them. And we also have the body of water. We're not gonna paint the rocks and the logs in there in the water, just to speed up this process a little bit. And then we have one slope with big evergreens on the left. So I'm gonna start with just drawing the line separating the water from our hills. I like to go for the rule of thirds, kind of going with the bottom third. I also like to exaggerate the rule of thirds a little bit sometimes when I put my line even lower. You can even go as far as 1/5. So if you separate your paper into 3 even parts, then this would be 1/3. So you don't have to copy exactly from the photograph. Now let's put down the main slope that we have going down from the top right corner. I usually mark a couple of points on the paper before I bring down the main line, just to kind of estimate how far it's supposed to go, how high it starts. So I want my slope to actually maybe take a little bit more space on the top. So I'm going to start it from here, and judging kind of from the water line where I want it to go, probably around here. So now it's just a little bit easier to take that line down. And I don't really like to create very perfect straight or curvy lines. I like it to be more natural, so I just kind of zigzag in a couple of areas. It doesn't have to be exact and really true to the photograph, because this is a landscape. Nobody's gonna go back and compare exactly if that line was supposed to be there or not. So, you know, just a little wiggle line going down. Since we have that down, and I don't have to bring the other side all the way to the other side of the paper, because we're gonna have different slope and there we're gonna have different elements. Now, since we have this one down, let's do the mountains in the back. So we have a kind of a more even part on the left and a few peaks on the right. So let's find the middle in between the two that separates them. It's kind of over the lower part of the slope. So this is where the two different types of the peaks that we have. So one is still a little bit kind of wiggly and curvy and angled on one part. Again, doesn't have to be exact, but then we have a little bit of opening there. Let's actually erase a little bit of this extra pencil mark. I just want to make sure I have this nice little cut into the mountains, and we have one of the peaks that is closer to us, and then there's another one. I'm gonna put it a little lower just for more interest, and then we have more somewhere in there. We have a couple of main shadows in there as well, like this large peak. It has sort of two sides. The one catches the sun a little bit more. So there's this line that goes down a little bit, separating the highlight and the shadow. And again, I'll also do this in a little bit of zigzag. There's the same pattern on the other mountain, also separating a little bit. Looks like there's a little line between the two mountains as well. And though I don't really care about getting it exactly right, the reason I do this is because the objects that are in the background, they're not going to have as much separation between light and shadow we're going to do that using color. So our shadows are just going to be a little bit bluer. So the reason I'm doing this is because we're going to be working wet and wet, and I just want to make sure that I put the right colors in the right areas because we're going to be working fast. So we have a little bit of snow resting kind of in the middle of these mountains, so I'm gonna mark down the main area of that snow in there as well. Also, it doesn't sit in a perfectly refined shape. There is a little less in one part, a little more in the other. We have a little bit of snow in the other areas of these mountains as well. I'm just gonna lightly mark it. And we also have some snow sitting a little bit horizontally on the slope of this mountain. Okay, for this main slope here, I don't want to put too much detail because, you know, the colors gonna do their work. But to make your painting a little bit easier, you can just put down the main lines. Like we have some evergreens going up the hill that kind of create this motion going up, and we have the main area where our yellow trees rise up to the mountain but don't really quite reach the top, so we're gonna have more of the stone showing, so we can just jot down this basic line, the separation, even though it's going to be wet and wet, it's going to be a little fuzzy. But just for ourselves to know where to stop. Okay, and we have a slope on the left. It's a little closer to us, so it's going to sit below this main water line, kind of cutting into the water a little bit. And we have one rocky slope going up. And just to finish this side over here, it comes a little closer. We can erase the water line so it's not confusing us. Once I erase a little bit of this extra heavy pencil I put down there. And the slope sort of continues going up in a couple areas that we see through the trees. Actually, it's a little higher than that. It goes quite up high, quite a steep slope. And we have the evergreens also going up on this slope. So if we separate a little bit of the land that we see right under the trees, and for the trees I just like to mark the upper part where the tips are going. This one is actually quite a tall one, so I don't really draw in the trees. I just mark kind of the openings in between them to remember to put enough of the background in there so we don't just make it look like a puzzle, pieces overlapping, so we have a little bit of the background elements showing. And there's a smaller tree gonna be in here. Alright, this is as much as we are gonna do for the pencil work. And we can start working with our colors. So we're going to start with quite large basic washes, and I'm starting with my largest brush, size 22. I like to work going from the top down, so I'm going to start with the sky, kind of going a little bit over the tips of the mountains, but not entirely because the mountains will be a different color. And then we're gonna go into the yellows for our greenery and for all of our foliage on the slope here. So make sure that you are washing your brush well between switching these colors, because we want to keep them nice and bright and vibrant so that we're not contaminating them too much. I will be using the same brush, so if you're using the same brush for these areas, make sure that you clean in between. So let's saturate our brush with quite a lot of water, and I'm going to paint my sky with the cerulean color. There are a couple of different ways that we're gonna explore painting sky in the future. Today it's fairly small area, so I don't need to wet it before I go into it. I can just jump right in, just making sure that I get enough this nicely saturated wash. We're gonna go in with the color, leaving out a couple of areas where our clouds are. So I'm not covering the entire area with my blue. Again, I don't have to copy exactly, but just to bring in a little bit of interest to the sky, I want to leave a couple of areas for our clouds nice and clean. We're also going to shade the clouds a little bit because they are not perfectly white. And we're gonna do the shading while this is all wet as well. So starting with my darker color at the top, because that's how the sky usually is. It's usually darker at the top. As I go down, I will be losing a little bit of that intensity. So I'm kind of painting around the negative shapes. I'm kind of painting the negative shapes around the clouds. And now I am cleaning my brush and drying it to soften the edges in some areas, and also to soften kind of the bottom of the sky. So I'm not putting any more paint necessarily, but I'm blending it a little bit so that it gets a little lighter towards the bottom. And so we lose a couple of the harsh edges. And now I'm just gonna take a little bit of alizarin crimson and a little bit of our cerulean blue, just to make a very, very light a purple color. And I don't need a lot of it. I'm just picking up a little bit with the tip of my brush, just to shade my clouds lightly. So I'm kind of dropping this on the bottom of the clouds in a couple areas. And again, any of the harsh edges we can just soften with the damp brush. And anywhere you want to lift up some colors to lighten some areas, again, just rub it with a damp brush. Okay, the sky is drying, and in the meantime we're gonna start working on the yellows. And since we are going to be dropping some colors onto our main slope, we can also copy the same colors going into the reflection of the water right away, just to make our job a little bit easier. So let's start with the brightest yellow first. I'm just using Sennelier. And on the side, I'm also going to pre-mix a little bit of Sennelier with Gamboge. So I have a little bit of the orangey tint right there and ready to go. So we can create a large area of the wet paint and then mix wet into it. So I'm just going to clean it now and go back to my sennelier. And to kind of keep the sense of motions of our trees going up the hill, this is how I'm going to be working. I'm going to be putting all of my brush strokes in that same pattern. So starting from the bottom, I'm going to be raising it up and going up. Feel free to leave a couple of areas of the paper showing. And now I can pick up some of my orange and kind of meet it at some areas on the edges of this yellow and drop it in there on the paper. We have some growing on the bottom a little bit. We can pick up a little bit more of the gamboge in some areas to make it more dramatic orange color. Now the area farther away from us is not going to be as vibrant because the colors farther away kind of lose their intensity. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of light red into my yellow mix. You can also give it a little bit of raw sienna in there as well. So our yellows in the background kind of going to be diluted a little bit, not as saturated. And I'm kind of letting them mix together so the transition doesn't look like two puzzle pieces stuck together. So it's a little more organic. We can also put a little bit of that more brownish orange at the top of the hill. And now I'm going to pick up a little bit of this harsh edge that we created, just so our next color is gonna mix nicely with it. So next we're gonna introduce a little bit of green in there while this is all wet. So for the green, I actually want to start with my Prussian green. It's very intense color on its own, but it's very easily manipulated because it is not as staining as a Viridian green, for example. And I'm gonna give it some sennelier yellow and a little bit gamboge. And we're also gonna drop it right into our wet paint, kind of continuing going in the same direction, going up the slope, bringing the paint up. And now we can start dropping this paint into the water, mimicking the similar way of mixing, but it doesn't have to be the same because this is just a reflection. And we can go back to our yellows as well. We will paint over this a little bit, kind of give it a little bit more detail, but this is just our first kind of preliminary underwash. So the water basically just mimics the same, mirrors, I meant to say, mirrors the same pattern. And here in the area where they meet, I'm just gonna soften that a little bit. But I do like to leave a little bit of the white area right under the shore. Okay, so for the rocky areas, we are going to mix a sort of a light shade of a purple color. So I'm going to take my ultramarine blue, give it some alizarin crimson. This purple is obviously very much purple. We need to tone it down a little bit to make it a workable purple for our slope. So I'm going to give it a little bit of light red. To kind of desaturate it and warm it up. And now we can go in and drop it over our rocky areas. And we can kind of let the two colors meet and mingle. I can also drop it over a couple of the white spots that I left there, so kind of fill those in with the rocks. I also have kind of some on the edge going on in there. I also have some right by the shore. And also drop those into the reflection as well. The paint is still wet, so it's blending nicely. Okay, I'm gonna give this just a couple of seconds to dry up a little bit. I see a lot of a sheen on my orange area over here, and I want to put down my mountains in there. So I don't want to mix too much with my orange. But what I can do in the meantime is to go back into my cerulean puddle and just fill in those areas of snow that we had resting on the slopes. Because that snow actually is sitting in areas of shadow. So what you see is just basically snow reflecting the color of the sky. That's why we're putting it down blue. It might seem odd a little bit at first, but once we put down the actual colors of the mountain, it's gonna make sense. And I can drop it in a couple more areas just to make it a little more interesting. Or even take it down a little bit, kind of going down the mountain a little more. And now while that snow is drying, I can pick up a size 10 brush, sort of the medium size brush, and pick up a little bit of a similar looking orange that we put down on the back of the hill in there, with the light red and our gamboge, a little bit of raw sienna in there. And now that our paper is damp but not too wet and not too dry, we can put down a couple of more intentional marks in there. It's still quite soft and it still blends a little bit, even if you don't see it blending right away. it is gonna kind of slowly dissolve a little bit into our drying color. But this kind of helps us achieve more variety between really soft blended marks of the first color we put down and more sharper lines that we're gonna put down once the paper is gonna be completely dry. You can even pick up some of that purple that we made for the rocks and kind of give that also a little bit of definition here and there. You can also drop just a little bit more of blue into that rock color that we made, sort of to indicate these new marks as shadows. A little bit more cerulean kind of blue in there. And these have to be quite light. So I'm working with very transparent color for the most part. And also a little bit down here at the bottom of our rocks, giving them a little bit of definition and also reflecting some of that in the water. As well. Okay, that is looking good. We can go back to our mountains in the background now and give them a little bit of color. So the mountains in the background are going to be done pretty much in just one wash that we're not gonna come back to. So we're gonna pre-mix the lighter, warmer color for the sunny side and a cooler color for the shadow side. So our warmer side, just the way that we did for the rocky area over here, we're gonna take some ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson. Warming it up with some light red. And we're gonna take some of the cerulean color, some of the blue color, because we have more of the atmosphere, kind of more of the air between us and the mountain, so it's gonna pick up more of the sky color. So that will be our shadow. So I'm starting with the highlight. Gonna give it a little bit more of the light red. We can warm it up slightly more. And now picking up our shadow color with the cerulean in it, we're gonna fill up the shadows. I'm kind of running out of my mix a little bit here, so I'm just gonna drop in again just the same colors. I didn't mix enough in the first time. And let your two colors meet, your warm highlights and your shadows, so they blend nicely. And we also have some trees kind of going up those slopes. So I'm gonna take some Prussian green and cerulean blue, and I'm just gonna tone it down a little bit with the Payne's gray. And just a little bit of the burnt umber, so it's not too brown. And I'm gonna drop this color into the drying slopes over here. You see it's kind of melting in there a little bit, just to kind of indicate some of the green forest up there that kind of more towards the bottom of these slopes, and they're drying, not drying, kind of stopping to grow the higher you go. And we want all of our details to be pretty soft, since all of this is going on in the background. Working from photograph, you still gonna have to use your judgment, remembering that everything in the distance has less detail, because cameras overcompensate for that. Cameras sharpen a lot of details, camera add a lot of details and a lot of extra contrast that we don't really need. Just going to smooth a couple of edges over my Alright, while the background is drying, we can work a little bit on this slope on the left. Sort of prepare the ground for our evergreens. And there's quite a lot of the dry grass in there, very brownish, but still some of the green showing in there. So let's start with our light red. And this one is the closest to us, so we're not afraid to make it a little bit of more higher contrast area. So I'm picking up also a little bit of the raw sienna. And we're gonna drop in our green in there, so the same green that we used before. We can even take a little bit more of the Prussian green, give it a little bit of raw umber to desaturate it slightly. Those colors are going to mix as they dry. You can put a little bit of the lighter green, maybe a little bit more yellow. little bit more of the raw sienna for a warmer. Okay, we don't want to overwork it too much, but we also have some rocks in there, so going back for the same ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson. But again, desaturated with some light red. Can get a little bit more blue. In the same way, we can bring these colors now down for our reflections. Drop quite a lot of water now. To kind of give this more room to blend. Anytime I reach back for colors, remix it, these are all the same colors I already named. I'm not introducing anything new. It's just sometimes when I see that I need a little bit of higher intensity of one color over the other, and I can just give it more water over here to let this softly blend. And I'm gonna drop a little bit of this cerulean in here, just since we don't really see much of the sky reflecting, but this would indicate a little bit of the mountains in the back sort of reflecting in the water. Can darken this shoreline. You can also direct your colors as they're drying. You can kind of push them down with a damp brush. Not too much, so you don't really pick up a lot of color, but you can kind of direct the flow as it's drying. Alright, now my slope on the right is dry, so I can go back into working with more details. And I'm gonna pick up my size 10 brush. So we have quite a lot of the trees going on in there, but we are gonna kind of generalize them into major shapes. So first I want to kind of redefine the same colors we already have in just a little bit more detail, a little bit more sharpness. So I'm gonna pick up a little bit of the light red and raw sienna. You can even drop a little bit of green in there. And kind of start redefining some of those little slopes that we see in the background. Again, working kind of with the direction of the landscape. And I'm gonna blend some of the areas so it's not standing out too much. We can also go back to our orange color here that we made with Sennelier Yellow and Gamboge. Also give it some raw sienna in there as well. And just kind of redefining some of the individual areas of trees. Some kind of more generalized masses on these trees. We can also pick up some green in there as well. Sort of the changes of color that we see without painting in any of the individual greens, because we're just not ready for them yet. The green's gonna go in shortly, those evergreens, really tall ones. I'm not really painting in any specific shapes. You see, I'm just kind of dragging my brush just so the viewer focuses rather on the colors, on these beautiful shapes, than seeing oh, this is a painted tree. No, there is a lot going on in there. We're kind of letting our imagination play a little bit and take control in some areas. And at this point, I'm not really looking at the reference image that much. I'm kind of listening to what my painting is saying, where it wants to go, the colors it wants to use. Because I'm not creating a specific photo replica of the photograph. I want it to be a little bit more of my own. Okay, now let's mix that darker green color. So I'm starting with my Prussian green, and I'm taking burnt umber and also some raw sienna. Oops, I used the wrong jar. Okay. And with the tip of my brush, I'm gonna start kind of putting down those masses of evergreens that occupy quite a lot of area on this distant slope. But again, I'm not putting them at a straight line, like they all lined up nicely. No, I'm gonna kind of put them randomly and repeating the pattern of my landscape. Also, I'm not making any specific trees. I'm just dabbing my brush on the paper. And let me zoom in so you can see a little bit better what's going on in there. And you can pick it up in some areas if you think that that was a little too much. I'm working just with the tip of my brush. Sometimes using it sideways even a little bit. So here, kind of going down, we have more of taller trees that we just see better because they're closer to us. But then they just continue going up the hill. And I don't mind my green blending into these new blotches of paint that I put down. That's okay. We can redefine our greens later if we need to. So there are more evergreens at the top of this hill. It's because they survive easier in colder, rougher climates. I'm just making sure to create a variation between smaller, shorter, and taller trees, and also the ones kind of grouped more together, just so it's a little more interesting to look at. Remixing some of the color now to kind of go back into some areas when it blended out and disappeared, to kind of reinstate that color there. I'll just actually pick it up a little bit from that distant slope. And I will actually put down a couple of the extra trees a little closer to us. So I'm giving it a little bit of ultramarine blue this time into my mix. So I had Prussian green, ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, and burnt umber and raw sienna. Because the ones to us, we are going to see a little bit clearer, so we're going to see a little bit more of that blueness in their shade. So I'm going to kind of improvise a little bit now. So this is not on a photograph, but I really want to see more of these beautiful trees closer to us. And we can drop also some more along the shore here. Remembering to again create a variation between them, so they're not all copies and clones of each other. And now I can also go back to a little bit more of my orange color with gamboge, light red, and Sennelier yellow. To paint in some of the orange trees. Can give it a little bit also quinacridone red just to spice up that orange a tiny bit more. Again, I'm just focusing on rather the shapes and the way that the color works and looks together, rather than painting any individual trees. So I'm kind of imagining masses of certain trees growing together and having the same color together. And you can layer it over a green as well. And also softening some of the areas just so we kind of have an interesting variation between the sharper and softer edges. I think I can put down a little bit more of the darker trees in there now as well, up on the hill, just so they don't all blend in together and have a little bit of variation in there. So just using the same color, I'm just over layering one more time to kind of give it more a darker value. And you can also just dab it in a couple of areas just to give it more depth, sort of indicating some space between the trees. Oh, this started flowing. That's okay. I think I dropped some the water from my brush by accident. Alright, it's starting to dress up quite nicely. You can also use some of this darker green over my green areas here, just to kind of shade it a little bit more and create kind of illusions of canopies. So just like shading sort of around a canopy of a tree, you know, just kind of doing reverse letter C, since our light is coming from the left, so the right side would be sort of more in shadow. Also shade some of the bottom areas of them as well. And give it a little bit of the Payne's Gray and a little bit of the cerulean to create more of a difference between the shade and the highlight. I have to take a little bit of this purplish color, but was more kind of cerulean. It was more cooler shade in it, and just use that to deepen the shadows sort of at the bottom between the trees. And also kind of paint in around our rocks a little bit as well. Again, just shading more on the right side. And we can do the same with the hill as well. Give a little bit more definition to the rocky parts in there with our purple color, and a little bit of cerulean in there, since shadows are supposed to be a little cooler. If you are working around other colors and you're noticing that yours is bleeding too much into the other colors, like you have no control over it, it means that your wash on the paper is just way too wet. Give it a little bit of time to dry. I don't like recommending using hair dryer if your area is too wet or you have a lot of detail, just because that force of air is going to blow your paint and you're going to lose all of the details you put down. So just give it some time to dry up. And we can come back to some details on the left side. I'm just giving some marks to this rocky side just to give it definition. I don't really know what exactly is going on in there, what rocks we have in there, how many. I'm just giving it some contrast. And again, bringing that down for reflection. You don't have to put it exactly in every area, but just kind of a couple of horizontal marks just to resemble those areas that you put down, sort of showing some ripples on the water, picking up colors and showing those reflections. Alright, now that we've put down quite a lot of the detail into the slope, actually, before we do reflections, let's finish up our evergreens on the left. So actually we're going to start with putting down the highlight first. Since these are quite close, we want to have really clear separation between highlight and shadow. That is what helps us to show that these evergreens are close. So I'm mixing the Prussian green with a little bit of Sennelier, a little bit of the Rosienna, and a little bit of the Gamboge. And I'm going to start with working on the highlight side. Just kind of dropping in some branches with this warm green. Pretty much painting the sunny side of them. Now the sun is not going to reach all the way down, so we don't have to put it all the way down. Again, I'm just kind of playing around with the tip of my brush, not making anything too specific. The viewer's imagination will pick up our hints and will tell the viewer, oh, I think that is an evergreen. Okay, we're gonna shade these later. This can dry up for now. Let's finish up our water, our beautiful reflections on the water. Since we've put down a lot of more darker colors in there, we can now kind of mimic them on the water. So the way the colors reflect in the water is usually the lightest color reflect darker, the darkers reflect lighter. So the contrast kind of disappears a little bit. Everything kind of evens out and blends together. If you have perfectly still water, like we have in this photograph, then you do have almost like a mirror reflection, If there is a little bit of a texture on the surface of the water, there's a little bit of wind, then it would be the ripples that will be picking up reflections. So you kind of see these horizontal lines of the ripples on the water, these little bit of waves. And I actually want to do a little bit of a mix of both. So we're gonna pick up again our colors that we used, some of the darker greens that we used for the evergreens with the Prussian green and burnt umber. We're gonna have some of the oranges in there as well. And I'm actually gonna take my large brush in here because we're gonna let them blend nicely with a lot of water in there. So I'm picking up some of that brownish orange color that we had sitting. I'm kind of dropping it where I see those colors reflecting where they are on the hill, because they kind of, you can take that angle and just flip it. So it's gonna go from the top down. And here I'm not putting down the same shapes. I am kind of resembling these sort of ripples on the water by doing a little bit of horizontal mark. We can bring some of the yellow back with the gamboge as well. And now we can pick up some green. Starting with a darker green with some Prussian green, ultramarine blue, and burnt umber. So we're gonna have some evergreens here on this side, and we're just gonna cheat. We're gonna put the reflection right in. So this area is actually quite in a big shadow. We can drag out these ripples. Now the similar way for these other evergreens that we put down there. It's okay if it mixes into the other colors. Again, we're not creating an exact mirror reflection. And we can pick up some of the lighter green color, give it a little bit of blue just to tone it down a little bit. Maybe a little bit more water so it's a little more transparent. You can also just drop some of the warmer green in there for those reflections. And I'm just gonna take a brush sort of loaded with water but not too much, and I'm just gonna marry these colors together in some areas, kind of leaving a little bit of the crispy edge, letting it stay there. can also drag it down. If you're losing some of the intensity, you can kind of bring it back with a little more pigment. Kind of just remixing a little bit of the colors that I've used. Since they blended a little bit, I can just put them down more locally. And here we can put down back a little bit of that purple color that we had reflecting. We have it in our mountains. Picking up this pattern of the ripples, kind of continuing going with it. Okay, so I want to pick up a little bit of the color from that distant hill, because we're gonna put down the details of this evergreen, so I don't really want them to mix together too much. So I'm gonna pick up just some water with my medium-sized brush, and I'm gonna rub some water on that area. And I'll just dab it with my paper towel to lighten it. So I'm kind of reactivating a little bit of that pigment with the water. And now I'm just dabbing the paper towel again to lighten it. It's become a little lighter now. And also pick up some of that top as well. Actually, I can just put down a little bit of like this orangey color in there, so it's not as pale. Okay, now we can finish working on our evergreens. This is going to be our darkest accent in this painting. So taking my Prussian green, taking some ultramarine blue, some Payne's gray, and burnt umber. You want this green to be more on the cooler side, less of a warmer side, to have a greater contrast between the warmth of the highlight and the coolness of the shadow. And also these are closer to us, so we see that they're generally a little bit more cooler than the other trees. And now I'm just painting down sort of the under shapes under some of the branches on the right side, but also mainly just the left side here. I mean the right side. So under shapes, like under the shadows of the left side and mainly the right side. it's bleeding a little bit into my heel there because I just re-wet it for picking up some color. It's okay, I can just pick it up with paper towel. It's important to remember that, you know, the trees have quite a lot of volume to them. They are not flat on the sides that are facing us, so will be some branches kind of wrapping around the tree, and they're going to be catching some sunlight in front as well. And just again playing around with the tip of my brush rather than focusing on creating any specific shapes. You can also use this color too. Maybe just a little bit of yellow in there, warm it up a little bit to give some detail to the grass here. Just kind of drag it up the side of the brush to now kind of match the intensity of the darkness of the evergreens, so the grass in comparison doesn't look too pale. I can put some also on like the tip of this shoreline, a couple of darker ones. Paint the grass, I'm just kind of flicking my brush upwards. Not again trying to paint every single little piece in there. I want to darken the rocks a little bit on the front as well to bring it even closer. So I'm going to take some Payne's Gray, some alizarin crimson, and a really deep dark purple, just a little bit of the burnt umber so that it's not as purplish and it was a little bit more kind of earthy tone in it. And I'm just gonna go around what I would imagine as being kind of the main shapes in those rocks. So I'm not, again, painting anything individual in there, just a little bit of the outline around the edge there. And I'll pick up a little bit to put down into the reflection of that lightly darker color that I put down. Also, I can pick up a slightly diluted shade of that, just for a little bit of a detail here and there along the shore and the reflection. Maybe just, again, using this shadow purple, just to put a couple of straight lines, sort of give an indication of the trunks of the trees or the shadow areas around them. Only on the areas that are closer to us. So this right side we're seeing a little bit better. And mainly on the lower part. Just a couple of dabs of that shadow color. And I just want to fix one area over here where I dropped some paint and my evergreens kind of disappeared in that fog. Maybe just a little bit. In the background again, where they kind of all nicely blended together, but we can just put down a couple of shadows into the main kind of large chunks of our evergreens, just to give them a little bit of definition, separate some trees from the other. I would like to give a little bit of warmth of the yellow. A little bit gamboge with a very light, sort of very faded glaze, because it can't be too powerful. To that hill that contrasts with our shadow side of the evergreen, maybe a little bit more orange in some areas. Maybe just a little bit more gamboge, kind of a little bit more orange in there. Just a little. We don't need to make that part too detailed. Kind of want to give a little bit more attention to this area, so I want to darken these trees just slightly. We kind of have more drama going on in there. Maybe a little bit along the shore, a little bit of green. All right, I think I am done. Look at your painting, look at what you think you can still add or improve, but don't overdo it. It's always better to do less than to do too much and then not know how to fix it. I'm going to now do my favorite part of the painting, which is removing the tape. And that's a wrap for today. I'm happy with how this painting turned out. I'm happy with the vibrancy. I'm happy with a lot of different areas that are going on in there. We have our water with different texture. We have our one hill that's kind of in the mid-ground. We have the mountains fading away. We have this really dark, rich color of the evergreens popping closer to us and bringing a lot of more definition into this painting. I hope you enjoyed painting with me. I hope you like this introduction into the painting process. Of course, we're going to be giving a lot of individual attention to all of the different specific areas as we go along. We're going to be focusing on how to paint water. We're going to be focusing on the reflections and all the different effects. We're going to be focusing on painting a lot of different trees a little bit more, so that will become a little more intuitive over time and it will speed up your process over time overall. But I hope you still give it a try today and still try this painting, give it your best. And if you had any questions, if you ran into any problems working on this, let me know and I'll be happy to help you, or I can address it maybe with more detail in the next videos. And I'm happy and I'm honored to have you here. If you're watching this as a part of a free preview, I hope you subscribe and join our community. If you're watching this as your first demo of my Patreon course, then I hope this inspires you to pick up your brushes more often and do more painting with us as we go along, and inspires you to explore more classes in this course. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in the future. Bye!